The clock in the Oval Office read 2:47 a.m. on a frigid December morning in 1941. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a man whose very posture exuded resilience despite his physical limitations, sat hunched over his desk, a cigarette holder clenched between his teeth. The air was thick with the acrid scent of tobacco and the unspoken weight of a world teetering on the brink. Just hours earlier, news had shattered the serene Sunday calm. Pearl Harbor. The attack had been swift, brutal, and devastating. Yet even as the nation reeled, another, far stranger battle was already underway, one that would pit American ingenuity against an enemy unlike any seen before. This is not just a story of war, but of a secret scientific race, a daring deception, and the eccentric genius who held the key to America's victory against a weapon more insidious than bombs. Our story truly begins not in the war rooms of Washington, but in the sun-drenched orange groves of Southern California, years before the first shots of World War II were fired. Here lived a man named Charles F. Richter, a seismologist at Caltech, whose name would become synonymous with the measurement of earthquakes. Richter was a brilliant, if somewhat aloof academic, more comfortable with the rumble of tectonic plates than the complexities of human interaction. His passion was understanding the Earth's tremors, developing scales to quantify their destructive power. Little did he know, his seemingly esoteric work would soon be twisted for a purpose far beyond seismic activity. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Adolf Hitler's Third Reich was consolidating its power, and with it, its scientific ambitions. German scientists, many of them brilliant, some coerced, were feverishly working on new technologies. Among their more chilling pursuits was the development of psychological warfare, weaponizing not just bombs, but also fear, doubt, and chaos. One particular project, shrouded in the utmost secrecy, aimed to exploit a deep-seated human vulnerability, the need for certainty and the terror of the unknown. The Nazi high command, increasingly paranoid and desperate for any advantage, began to explore what they termed Wunderwaffen, or wonder weapons. These were not always conventional arms. Some were bizarre, almost mystical. One such project, spearheaded by a shadowy figure known only as Der Architekt, or the Architect, sought to create a weapon that would not destroy cities, but dismantle the very fabric of society, sowing discord and panic from within. The concept was simple, yet terrifying: to generate undetectable, low-frequency vibrations that would induce a pervasive sense of unease, anxiety, and even hallucinations in target populations. They believed these psychic tremors could be tailored to specific frequencies, subtly influencing behavior, inciting riots, or even driving individuals to madness. Their initial experiments were crude, involving large, cumbersome machines that produced infrasound, sounds below the range of human hearing. Yet even in their nascent stages, the results were disturbing. Test subjects reported feeling watched, experiencing sudden inexplicable dread, and even seeing fleeting, shadowy figures at the periphery of their vision. The Architect, a former occultist turned pragmatic military scientist, was convinced they were on the verge of a breakthrough that could cripple an enemy without firing a single bullet. News of these strange German experiments, albeit fragmented and distorted, eventually reached Allied intelligence. The reports were met with a mixture of skepticism and alarm. Could such a weapon truly exist? Was it merely psychological manipulation or something more sinister? Winston Churchill, a man who understood the power of both rhetoric and scientific innovation, took the threat seriously. He authorized a top-secret Anglo-American initiative, code-named Project Nightingale, to investigate and, if necessary, counter this emerging danger. The Americans, still struggling to recover from Pearl Harbor and gearing up for war, found themselves confronting not just a conventional enemy, but a potential war of the mind. General George Marshall, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, was briefed on Project Nightingale. He knew he needed someone unconventional, someone who understood the subtle vibrations of the world. His thoughts turned to a quiet, unassuming professor in Pasadena. Dr. Charles Richter, oblivious to the storm brewing in Europe, was enjoying a particularly fruitful period of research. His Richter Scale was gaining international recognition, and he was immersed in his beloved seismographs, meticulously recording every tremor. One afternoon, a sleek black car, far too formal for the dusty Caltech campus, pulled up to his office. Out stepped two men in dark suits, their expressions grim. They introduced themselves as agents from a classified government agency and requested his immediate assistance on a matter of paramount national security. Richter, initially annoyed by the interruption, soon found himself in a high-security facility deep within the Nevada desert. Here he was shown the intercepted German reports, crude schematics of their infrasound generators, and chilling testimonies from captured agents who had experienced the psychic tremors. The Germans, with their characteristic thoroughness, had even developed a rudimentary psycho-seismic map attempting to correlate infrasound frequencies with specific emotional responses. Richter, ever the scientist, approached the problem with a mix of academic curiosity and professional skepticism. He initially dismissed the idea of psychic tremors as pseudoscience. These are just a form of extreme anxiety, he argued, magnified by the stress of war. However, as he delved deeper, analyzing the German data with his unparalleled understanding of vibrational frequencies, a chilling possibility began to emerge. He realized that while the German theory of direct mind control was likely exaggerated, the physiological effects of prolonged exposure to specific infrasound frequencies were indeed real and potentially devastating. The human body, it turned out, was far more susceptible to these low-frequency vibrations than previously understood. Infrasound, vibrating at the resonant frequencies of internal organs, could induce nausea, disorientation, panic attacks, and even a feeling of being unmoored from reality. The Germans, in their twisted brilliance, had stumbled upon a way to weaponize a natural phenomenon, not to control minds, but to destabilize them. Richter's mission, as outlined by the grim-faced generals, was twofold. First, to develop a reliable method for detecting these German infrasound emissions, and second, to devise a countermeasure. The stakes were immense. If the Germans could deploy this weapon on a large scale, particularly in densely populated areas, the resulting panic and chaos could cripple the Allied war effort. Richter, a man who preferred the company of his instruments to people, found himself thrust into a world of military secrecy and espionage. He assembled a small, hand-picked team of brilliant engineers and physicists, many of whom were as eccentric as he was. They worked tirelessly, their desert laboratory humming with the quiet whir of sophisticated machinery.
His initial challenge was detection. Infrasound, by its very nature, was difficult to isolate from natural background noise, the wind, distant ocean waves, even the subtle rumblings of the Earth itself. Richter, drawing upon his seismological expertise, began to adapt his earthquake detection equipment. He developed highly sensitive microbarometers and low-frequency accelerometers, capable of distinguishing the subtle, unnatural vibrations of German origin from the symphony of natural sounds. He realized the Germans were using highly specific, almost melodic infrasound signatures tailored to resonate with human physiological responses. He called them the devil's hum. The team's breakthrough came after months of frustrating failures. They discovered that the German infrasound generators, while powerful, left a faint, almost imperceptible aftershock in the Earth itself, a sort of seismic echo. By combining his atmospheric sensors with modified seismographers, Richter could triangulate the source of these emissions, almost like listening for a ghostly whisper in a hurricane. With detection established, the next phase was counteraction. The generals wanted a jamming solution, something that would neutralize the German weapon. Richter, however, had a more audacious idea. He proposed not just to block the German frequencies, but to reverse them, to turn their own weapon against them. His theory was based on the principle of destructive interference. If they could generate a precisely calibrated infrasound wave, exactly out of phase with the German emissions, the two waves would cancel each other out, effectively silencing the devil's hum. But Richter didn't stop there. He theorized that by carefully modulating these counter-frequencies, they could not only neutralize the negative effects, but also induce a subtle sense of calm, even well-being in the target population. He called this audacious concept Project Serenity. The idea was met with considerable skepticism. "You want to fight an invisible weapon with an invisible lullaby?" scoffed one general. But Richter, with his quiet intensity, patiently explained the science. He argued that just as certain frequencies could induce anxiety, others could subtly promote relaxation. It was a gamble, but with the threat of the German Wunderwaffe looming, the Allied command reluctantly gave him the green light. Richter and his team worked feverishly, transforming their desert laboratory into a sonic battlefield. They built massive experimental infrasound generators, carefully calibrating them to produce precise frequencies. The challenge was immense. The human ear couldn't hear these sounds, making it incredibly difficult to verify their effects directly. They relied on an array of sophisticated sensors and, controversially, human volunteers who were exposed to controlled doses of both the simulated German devil's hum and Richter's Serenity waves. The results were astonishing. Volunteers exposed to the simulated German frequencies reported feelings of intense anxiety, paranoia, and even mild hallucinations. When Richter's Serenity waves were introduced, these symptoms rapidly subsided, replaced by a sense of calm and mental clarity. It wasn't mind control, Richter stressed, but rather a manipulation of the body's natural physiological responses to external stimuli. Project Serenity was ready. The first operational deployment came during the preparations for D-Day. Allied intelligence had detected significant German infrasound emissions targeting coastal towns in northern France, aiming to sow panic and confusion among the civilian population and disrupt Allied logistical efforts. Under the cover of darkness, specially modified Allied ships, equipped with Richter's massive infrasound generators, moved into position. As the German devil's hum began to ripple across the landscape, designed to make the French populace restless and prone to irrational fear, Richter's Serenity waves countered them. The effect was subtle but profound. Instead of panic, reports from the ground indicated an unusual calmness among the French civilians, almost a quiet resilience. Farmers continued their work, fishermen went about their catches, and even those sympathetic to the resistance reported an unexplainable sense of fortitude. The intended German psychological disruption failed spectacularly. The Battle of the Atlantic, too, became a proving ground for Richter's technology. German U-boats, notorious for their wolf pack tactics, were believed to be utilizing localized infrasound emitters to disorient Allied convoys, disrupting sonar readings and causing inexplicable mechanical failures and crew fatigue. Richter's team developed smaller, more agile counter-infrasound devices that could be deployed by Allied destroyers. The results were dramatic. Suddenly, U-boat sightings became more frequent, and their attacks less coordinated. The mysterious mechanical failures on Allied ships diminished, and crew morale improved. The devil's hum of the deep was being systematically silenced. Richter, always the academic, remained largely detached from the grander narrative of the war, focusing solely on the scientific problem at hand. He continued to refine his technology, pushing the boundaries of infrasound manipulation. He even began to explore the potential for using targeted, therapeutic infrasound frequencies for medical purposes, a vision far ahead of his time. The war raged on, but the secret battle of the psychic tremors was being won. The Germans, increasingly frustrated by the inexplicable failure of their Wunderwaffe, began to suspect sabotage, but they could never pinpoint the source. Their architect, their shadowy infrasound guru, became increasingly desperate, convinced the Allies possessed some form of occult protection. As the tide of war turned, the Allied forces pushed into Germany. One of the highest priorities for intelligence teams was to locate and dismantle the German infrasound research facilities. They eventually found their architect's main laboratory, a chilling underground complex filled with bizarre machinery, half-finished psycho-seismic maps, and detailed journals describing their intended weaponization of fear. Richter himself was present during the liberation of the facility. He walked through the echoing chambers, his face impassive, observing the German equipment with a detached scientific interest. He even found a partially completed scale, remarkably similar to his own, but designed to measure psychic resonance rather than seismic intensity. It was a perverse mirror image of his life's work. In the aftermath of the war, the full extent of the German infrasound project was revealed. It was a terrifying testament to the lengths to which a desperate regime would go to gain an advantage. And it was a testament to the quiet brilliance of Charles F. Richter, a man who, far from the battlefields, had waged and won a silent war of vibrations. After the war, the details of Project Nightingale and Project Serenity remained highly classified for decades. Richter returned to Caltech, to his beloved seismographers and the study of natural earthquakes. He never spoke publicly about his wartime work, carrying the secret of the Devil's Hum and the Serenity waves with him. He continued his research, forever refining his understanding of the Earth's subtle tremors, perhaps always listening for an echo of the secret war he had helped to win. The story of Charles F. Richter and his silent war against the German psychic tremors is a testament to the hidden battles fought during World War II, battles not with bullets and bombs, but with science, ingenuity, and the subtle and often surprising forces of the universe. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the brilliance of the human mind, applied to the most unexpected fields, can turn the tide against the most insidious of threats. And it is a story that reveals the profound and often surprising ways in which seemingly abstract scientific knowledge can become the most powerful weapon of all.